This is the Leaders on Fire podcast. On this show, we'll be inviting guests in to talk about crucible moments in their lives and unpack how it developed character and perseverance and how they emerged as leaders on fire. We hope that this podcast is an encouragement and an inspiration to you. Today, I am more excited than ever because we get to have on Jon and Tim, the founders of the Bible Project. I know that they've personally impacted my life through the material that they've put out there. They've got such great content, and I'm excited to unpack this idea of the crucible with them today on our episode. So let's welcome them to the show. Well, Tim, Jon, welcome to the Leaders on Fire podcast. Man, we are stoked to have you guys on the show.
Thanks for having us, Drew.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to come and talk.
Yeah. So, I don't know you guys that well, but I know you probably a lot better than you know me because I've been digesting your content for several years now. So I know your voice as well. Our family's enjoyed your content. So first of all, thank you for the work that you guys are doing. It's really been awesome. It's been impactful in my life. And then, Jon, I had a chance to connect with you, I think it was maybe 6 months ago. You were teaching at Inger House in Kauai and met my son, Malachi, which, by the way, he's married and they are due to have a baby in May, believe it or not. Can you believe that? So Malachi's life is growing well. But anyways, he made the introduction for us to connect, which I thought was pretty cool. So anyways, super stoked to have you guys on here. So to start out, I want to light the fire and learn just a little bit about each of you guys. So just briefly kind of share, personally who you are, do you have families, and just a couple minute overview of you personally, and then I'll ask about the Bible Project.
So got a family, wife, 2 kids. We live here in Portland. We actually kind of have similar family dynamics. 2 boys. My boys are 13 and 10, about to be 11. Your boys are
13 and 11.
13 and 11. Been in Portland for 20 years, but from the Northwest. And it's a little bit about me.
I grew up here in Portland and met Jon. We met in college and at a small Christian college here in Portland. And there you go. I don't know, I kind of started following Jesus because of an outreach ministry to skateboarders, a skateboard park built and run by a church. And that was my journey. It was across the street from the college where I met Jon. There you go. So we also met the women that would become our wives in that season of life. And then there you go. So I did a season away from Portland in the Midwest in Wisconsin, and Jerusalem, even further west or east for graduate school, and made my way back to Portland because I love it, and it's where grandparents and free babysitting are for us. So,
oh man, that's great. Hey, by the way, have you heard of Camp Woodward? The skate park?
Oh, okay. Totally.
Yeah, so I was just there this weekend. Pennsylvania has a Woodward location. My son's a big skateboarder. So Malachi was too, but my youngest son, Levi, dude, that place is incredible. It's awesome. I don't know if you guys have been to a Woodward, but man, it was lights out.
Just seen videos.
Yeah. The one here in Oregon is right between Portland and Mount Hood, where all the good skiing and snowboarding is. It's an amazing outdoor skate park there. Obviously operates seasonally because it's under tarps and snow a good chunk of the year. But it's an amazing skate park.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so tell us a little bit about how in the world did you start the Bible Project? Like, what was it that inspired you to take action and kind of come together and say, you know what? Maybe if we join forces, we could do something cool. Like, what does that story look like?
We studied the Bible together in undergrad, and afterwards I went and started making explainer videos in the marketplace, mainly for technology companies. So that was my career. And it was really fun to learn the craft of using animation to explain things. And I really fell in love with that medium. And just always had this hunch that it could be used for something much more than just selling technology products or whatever story we were telling. And at the same time, having this crisis of faith where I was committed to following Jesus and being part of the church and everything, but like my relationship with the Bible had fallen flat. Like I just didn't know what to do with the Bible anymore. And I was really interested in theology and interested in making sense, but I needed someone else to help me make it make sense. And so our relationship, Tim and I, had just continued throughout those years. And Tim was this Bible nerd that I could talk to and try to wrestle down these questions in a way that just felt really beautiful and full of life. And so just the idea came together. Why don't we use this craft of animated explainers to then distill these things that we're talking about? And I really had no idea what I was tapping into with Tim, really, because you had just a wealth of ideas and knowledge to like, let's go. I've got 100 videos I'd want to make right off the bat.
Yeah, I think so. We didn't have a grand vision. It was more the videos are born out of actual conversations that we were having.
Yeah.
And then that's why a lot of the video content has our two voices in conversation. And even though we write those are scripted, they're condensing actual things that we've talked through in actual conversation over the years. So that was an important element of discovering together, Jon working out his questions and me working out the things that I think is the coolest stuff in the world to think about, and finding ways to communicate it in ever simpler ways. And then it's not every day, that you meet a friend who has an animation studio already like built and developed, who approaches you and is like, hey, would you be interested in making some videos? So that was kind of the genesis. It was us in many ways working out our own journeys of following Jesus and wanting to, hopefully that might be helpful to other people. So we made some videos, raised money for them, and then released them. But then the model, again, that you developed of a crowdfunded model was, what if we would know real quick if the idea had any momentum if we invited people to help us make the next videos, so they could be paid for already by the time we release them, so it can always be available for free. And that idea picked up steam as the project launched.
Yeah. So that was 2014, and sometime in end of 2015, maybe 2016.
For me, it was 17.
17,
early 17.
Okay.
For full time.
Full time.
It was kind of like quarter time. First, it was volunteer.
Yeah.
Weekends and evenings. And then it was
a day a week,
quarter
and
time.
then quarter time.
Yeah.
It was kind of stepping into it. I didn't. I had left my previous gig. Well, I still owned a company that I just didn't have to work in. So I just kind of was free. So I was giving most of my time, and I don't know exactly when I started paying myself, but it was. I think I just matched you as you came on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Blurry season.
So
do you still have the business, or did you get rid of that?
I got rid of it, which was I think a key crucible moment for me was that time period of deciding to let that go. But that all finalized in 2015.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe we can dig into that more, because I'm curious about that transition and that journey. And those are hard to take, those steps, leaps of faith, and to go into that. So that'll be good to unpack. Okay, so would like to shift to this idea of the crucible. So that's a good segue. And the way I usually position this, just from my own studying and kind of my own thought processes around it, we see in Scripture that the crucible is used as a picture and a metaphor of God using a crucible to melt away the impurities, right? And he talks about being purified as gold or as like silver. We see references to the refiner's fire. We see in James him talking about trials as tests, right? And so we have these different ideas around these crucible moments and how God might be using those to grow our character. And I read something about a silversmith that I think is really interesting that I want to get your feedback on too is, I had this idea that, a silversmith knows when the silver is ready to come out of the crucible, when all the impurities are melted away, when he can see his reflection. And so likewise it is with God, when we're in those crucible moments and when we're better reflecting his image, he pulls us from that crucible, either prepared for something he's got prepared for us, either future works or the refinement or the character development, but we become more and more like him through those processes. Sometimes those crucibles are moments. Sometimes they're seasons of weeks or months. Sometimes they're really, really long for people. And sometimes people are in a crucible that only get out once they go to heaven, because they're dealing with some sort of a physical ailment or a sickness or a thorn that just isn't removed. And so would like your perspectives of your thoughts on the crucible, how God uses those and what you see in Scripture.
Yeah, I really resonate. We ended up making a whole video and a podcast series about this theme in the Bible. We call it the test. But it's interesting, one of the biblical words for test, the Hebrew word bachan, comes from metallurgy, like the practice of metal smithing, which is about melting down metal so that any of the rocks or impurities within it, can get loosened from the metal, and when it goes liquid, and then you filter it out to purify it. And so it's a deeply biblical image. It's woven throughout really the whole story of the Bible. In a way, every human being in the story of the Bible, and then I think it's a model for how we're to think of the journey of being a human, is about receiving the gift of our existence that none of us gave to ourselves, and then being our existence and life journey forces us with all these choices, and some of them are really hard and force us to give up what we think we need or want, only to discover that act of surrender somehow is the opening of ourselves to what God has for us, which often is getting the thing back, like Abraham got Isaac back after he surrendered him when God tested him. But then other times it's giving up something that you actually, once you give it up, you realize it's the thing that you actually don't want and isn't good for you. So anyway, I don't know. We could talk for a long time, and we talked for hours, in fact, about this theme in a long podcast series. But it's a really important image in the Bible of going through the test as like the best, worst thing that God takes us through,
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be sure to include the link to that, those lessons in this podcast link. So that'll be great for people to be able to take that and go deeper. Jon, what's your perspective around what Tim shares? I know it's a big topic, but like if somebody you run into somebody and say, "Hey, Jon, tell me, what does this crucible mean?" Like, what's your couple minute viewpoint on that?
I think I would just add to what Tim has said, which is there's a really interesting line in the prayer Jesus gave us to pray, where he says, "Don't lead us into the test." It's usually translated, "Don't lead us into temptation," but it's the word for test. It's the same word that James uses. It's the Greek word from this Hebrew idea of God testing us to find out what our character is. And so there's something good about the test, but the tests are hard. And Jesus invites us, kind of allows us, almost empathetically, to pray, "Father, I know tests are going to come, but it would be really nice today if you didn't lead me into one."
Yeah, go easy on me.
Go easy on me. It's the prayer Jesus let us pray.
Yeah.
And I've always thought the really good Christian prays, like, "Bring on the test." And I suppose there is a place for that. And I think we did look at a psalm where the psalmist said,
yeah, that's right. Test me and know my heart.
yeah, test me and know my heart. Bring on the test. But man, I know my heart enough to know, like, maybe let's lay off the test today. And so I don't know. I just think there's something there, and we know they're going to come, and we know we deal with them all the time. But we also have a God who wants us to find rest and comfort, and know that there'll be times where we can, not be led into them.
Yeah, and maybe that's, the follow-up to that line in the Lord's Prayer. Don't lead us into the test, but, and I think implied, if in your wisdom you do take us through a test, deliver us from the evil one. Like, don't abandon us in the test. Be with us through the fire. And that's, there's a lot to meditate on, the fact that Jesus invited us to pray that regularly.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing that. And I also think of, when James is kind of talking about that at the beginning in chapter 1, and he's also saying shortly after about the test, he talks about pray and ask for wisdom. And sometimes that verse is actually used out of that context, and it is a good passage to be praying for wisdom and ask what we should do. If any of you ask wisdom, ask. We should ask. But it's in the context of this passage around testing, And so, what are your thoughts around that? Like, man, I'm in a crucible, or I'm in a season. It looks to me that when we're suffering and we're in a trial, we're in a test, that we're to ask God for wisdom, Lord. And it doesn't say specifically, like, ask God for help through this. He just says, ask for wisdom. How do you guys apply that in that context?
Yeah, maybe in a way, every significant decision you make in life is a kind of test, in as much as you probably have a set of values that's informing how you might make a decision. But if you're trying to discern, right, to discern, how should these values get expressed? I don't know, I'm thinking of a parenting scenario my wife are in right now, and it feels like a significant decision on behalf of one of our kids, and it'll have multiple implications, for a while, and it's a test. So it's exactly, we're praying for wisdom. So in a way, it's exactly what James has in mind.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just what exactly is a test. Maybe our imaginations tend to go towards emotional, physical pain or grief. But I think, again, this theme in the Bible is really teaching us to see every time any significant decision is before us, it's an opportunity to probably surrender something and abandon ourselves to God and trust His wisdom in ways that might be uncomfortable. Oh, that's my first thought.
Yeah. One of the things that, if you watch our stuff or listen to our conversations, you'll know that we spend a lot of time in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 in particular. And those stories really setting the stage for the template of all the themes in the Bible and the story of the Bible. And so it's interesting to think about the test in the story of Genesis too, of the tree. And we've talked about the tree of knowing good and bad.
Yeah, the forbidden tree.
Forbidden tree. Yeah. Or knowing good and evil, how it's usually translated, Tov and Ra. We've talked about it a lot, and to think of it as a test, I think it's always tripped me up growing up in the faith. Like, why would God do that? Is God just being cruel? Didn't He know that they wouldn't be able to handle that? Just why trip us up like that? But this opportunity to say, your desires are good. Like all these trees that I've planted are good, and eat of them. But your desire can lead you astray. And there's actually one tree here that's going to look good, but it's actually not good. And the only way you're going to know the difference is if you come to me and like listen to my voice, get my wisdom, and I'll tell you what to do. And it was very simple. It was like, that one, not good. And if only all tests were actually that simple.
Yeah, right.
But it just sets the template for this theme of being in a moment where our desire is leading us one way, and this is where the surrender theme comes in, is to go, is that desire actually leading me in the path of life or not? Do I need to lay that down or not?
Because it might be.
Because maybe it is.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not. How do I know the difference?
Yeah.
And the difference is God's voice telling us. And so how do we learn to listen to God's voice? And how do we know that? And then this is what the story of the Bible then takes us on a journey of what does it mean to follow God, to listen to his commands, to read the Bible as God's instruction. All of these things then become part of that, finding wisdom so that we can choose the path that leads to life. And yeah, I think we're just at the center of it.
Man, that's a fun discussion. I appreciate you guys unpacking that a little bit with me. Okay, so we've fanned the flame and got things warmed up a little bit. We've talked about the crucible, the refiner's fire. Great discussion, and I can't wait for our listeners to dig into the lessons on the test that you guys have put together. So I want to pause and I want to invite our listeners to join us for a part 2, which we'll talk about next, which is your stories of entering the crucible, what that was like for you, and it might be one, might be multiple. And what your perspective was in it, and then did it change after? So we're going to unpack that a little bit, diving into this metaphor of the crucible. So appreciate what you guys have shared, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Perhaps it has prompted a painful memory, or challenged you to reflect on times you were in the crucible. Some of you may be in a crucible now. But be encouraged. Maybe, just maybe, God is using this to refine your character so that you emerge as a leader on fire. If today's episode was an encouragement to you, share it with others who may also find encouragement in the Leaders on Fire podcast. So, let's go into the world sent out as leaders on fire. Until next time.